Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of history's most brutal and unforgiving experiences. A single winter night in the life of a medieval peasant. Forget everything you think you know about cozy fireplaces and warm blankets. What we're about to explore is a world where surviving until dawn was a genuine achievement, where the cold wasn't just uncomfortable, was a relentless enemy trying to kill you. So before you get comfortable in your heated home, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together, because what we're about to experience isn't just history, it's a testament to human endurance in conditions that would break most modern people. Within hours, the winter sun hangs low in the gray sky, like a dying ember, offering no warmth, only the cruel promise that darkness is coming. It's January 1347, and you're a peasant in a small English village, watching the last precious hours of daylight slip away like water through your frozen fingers. In the medieval world, sunset doesn't just mean the end of the workday, it means the beginning of a 12-hour battle for survival. You're standing in a field that stretches to the horizon, the soil frozen solid beneath your feet like iron. Your breath forms thick clouds in the frigid air, and you can feel ice crystals forming in your nostrils. With each inhalation, the temperature is already well below freezing, and it's only going to get worse as the night deepens. Your hands are wrapped around the wooden handle of a crude hoe, but you can barely feel your fingers anymore. You've been working since before dawn, breaking up frozen clouds of earth in preparation for spring planting that's still months away. Your palms are raw and bleeding from gripping the rough wood, and your back aches from hours of bending and straightening in the bitter cold. The other peasants scattered across the field are in similar condition, bent figures wrapped in threadbare cloaks, their faces gray with exhaustion and cold. There's no cheerful conversation, no songs to pass the time. Everyone is focused on the simple task of surviving until the overseer calls an end to the day's labor. That overseer sits on his horse at the edge of the field, wrapped in a thick woolen cloak lined with fur. His breath doesn't form clouds like yours does. He's warm, well-fed, protected from the elements that are slowly killing you. He watches the workers with cold, calculating eyes, occasionally shouting orders or threats to keep everyone moving. "Work faster, you lazy dogs," he calls out, his voice carrying easily across the frozen ground. The Lord's fields won't tend themselves. You redouble your efforts, ignoring the pain in your hands and back. The feudal system that governs your life is simple and brutal. You work until you drop, and when you can't work anymore, you're replaced. There's no retirement, no disability benefits, no safety net any kind. You work or you die, and sometimes you die anyway. Your stomach growls with a hollow, aching sound that reminds you of this morning's meager meal, a piece of dark bread so hard it could break teeth, washed down with weak ale that tasted more like dirty water than anything resembling modern beer. It's been 8 hours since you've eaten anything, and your body is beginning to consume itself for energy. This is chronic malnutrition, not the dramatic starvation you might imagine, but the slow, grinding hunger that saps your strength and clouds your mind. You're always hungry, always tired, always operating at the edge of your physical capabilities. Your body has adapted to survive on minimal calories, but that adaptation comes at a cost. You're weak, susceptible to disease, and aging far faster than you should. The cold is becoming unbearable now. Your feet, wrapped in strips of cloth and stuffed into crude leather shoes, are completely numb. You suspect that several toes may already be frostbitten, but there's nothing you can do about it. You can't stop working to warm your feet, can't seek shelter, can't even stamp them to restore circulation without risking the overseer's wrath. Your clothes offer little protection against the elements. You're wearing a rough woolen tunic that reaches to your knees, a pair of loose underwear made of linen, and woolen hose that tie to your braids with leather thongs. Over this, you have a thin cloak that's more holes than fabric, worn through by years of use and rough treatment. The wool is scratchy and uncomfortable, but it's what you have. It's been dyed with whatever materials were available, perhaps madder for a faded red, or left its natural brown. The colors are muted and earthy, nothing like the vibrant hues you see in medieval manuscripts which depicted the clothing of the wealthy. Your clothes haven't been washed in weeks. Water is precious. Soap is expensive. And the time required for washing and drying clothes is time you can't spare from survival. Instead, you simply wear your clothes until they fall apart, then patch them or replace them. If you can afford to. As you work, you become aware of the sounds around you, the rhythmic thudding of hose against frozen earth, the occasional grunt of effort from your fellow workers, the constant whistle of wind across the barren landscape. But underneath it all is a more ominous sound, the wheeze and rattle of sick lungs struggling to process the cold air. The man working next to you, Thomas, a farmer in his 30s who looks 50, is coughing up blood. The combination of cold air, physical exertion, and the dust from the frozen earth has damaged his lungs, and each cough sends bright red droplets onto the gray soil. He'll be dead within a year, you know. But he keeps working because he has no choice. Disease is a constant companion in medieval times. Everyone has something: a persistent cough, infected wounds that won't heal, parasites that sap their strength. No medical care beyond what the village-wise woman can provide with her limited knowledge of herbs and folk remedies. Most ailments are simply endured until they either get better on their own or kill you. The church bell tolls in the distance, its bronze voice cutting through the wind like a blade. 4 o'clock, the canonical hour of none, and still 2 hours until the official end of the workday. But in winter, those 2 hours feel like an eternity. The sun is already low on the horizon, and you know that darkness will fall long before you're allowed to stop working. Your world has shrunk to the small patch of earth in front of you, the weight of the hoe in your hands, and the constant battle against cold, hunger, and exhaustion. This is what medieval labor does to the human spirit. It reduces you to a machine, a tool for converting human suffering into agricultural productivity. The feudal system that governs your life is a crushing weight that presses down on every aspect of your existence. You don't own the land you work, you're bound to it, and to the Lord who controls it, required to work his fields for a certain number of days each week, and to give him a portion of everything you produce. You can't leave without permission, can't marry without consent, can't even sell what little you produce without giving your Lord his share first. You're not quite a slave, but you're not free either. You're somewhere in between, trapped in a system that offers little hope of improvement or escape. The Lord himself is warm and comfortable in his manor house, counting the profits from your suffering. He's never worked a day in the fields, never felt the bite of winter wind or the gnaw of hunger. To him, you're not a human being with feelings and needs. You're a piece of equipment that needs to be driven hard to get maximum productivity. As the afternoon wears on, the cold becomes more intense. The wind picks up, driving across the open fields with renewed fury. It cuts through your thin clothes like they're made of paper, and you can feel it stealing what little body heat you have left. Your breath forms thick clouds that freeze almost instantly, creating ice crystals on your beard and around your nostrils. Your hands are in agony now. The wooden handle of the hoe has worn away. What little skin remains on your palms, leaving raw, bleeding wounds that will take weeks to heal properly. Blood flows freely, making the handle slippery and difficult to grip. You have to stop frequently to wipe the blood away, but each pause risks attracting the overseer's attention. The other workers around you are showing similar signs of distress. Several are limping from injuries sustained during the day's work. Others are coughing violently, their bodies racked by spasms that double them over. But no one stops, no one complains, no one asks for help. They all know that showing weakness will only make their situation worse. Around 5 o'clock, disaster strikes. An older woman named Edith, probably in her 30s, ancient by modern standards, suddenly cries out and falls to her knees. The cold has finally overcome her body's ability to function, and she can no longer support her own weight. The overseer rides over immediately, his face dark with anger. "Get up," he shouts. The Lord's work doesn't wait for Malinger. Edith tries to stand, but her legs won't support her. She falls again, this time face first into the frozen earth. The overseer dismounts and kicks her in the ribs hard enough to crack bones. "I said get up," he roars, raising his whip. "Please, sir," Edith gasps, blood trickling from her mouth. "I can't. I'm too cold. I need to rest." The overseer's response is swift and brutal. The whip comes down across Edith's back with a sound like breaking wood. She screams, a sound of pure agony that cuts across the field like a blade. The whip rises and falls again, tearing through her thin woolen dress and opening long gashes in her flesh. You want to help, want to intervene, but you know that doing so would only make things worse for both of you. The feudal system doesn't tolerate insubordination, and helping a fellow worker who's being punished would be seen as rebellion against authority. You keep working, your eyes fixed on the ground, trying to block out the sounds of Edith's suffering. After what feels like an eternity, the beating stops. Edith lies motionless on the frozen ground, blood pooling beneath her. The overseer remounts his horse and addresses the other workers. "Let this be a lesson to all of you," he says coldly. "The Lord expects his workers to be strong and reliable. Those who can't meet his expectations will be replaced." 2 of the younger workers are ordered to drag Edith to the edge of the field and leave her there. Whether she lives or dies is no longer the overseer's concern. She's been written off as a loss, a broken tool to be discarded. Her 6 children will now be orphans, left to survive on their own or die trying. The incident casts a pall over the remaining workers. Everyone knows that they could be next, that a single moment of weakness or bad luck could result in the same fate. The fear is palpable, adding another layer of stress to an already unbearable situation. You redouble your efforts, ignoring the pain in your hands and back, pushing your body beyond its limits in a desperate attempt to avoid Edith's fate. The hoe feels like it weighs 100 lb, and each blow against the frozen earth sends shockwaves up your arms and into your shoulders. The sun continues its relentless descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the frozen ground. The temperature is dropping steadily, and you can feel the cold seeping deeper into your bones with each passing minute. Your body is beginning to shut down non-essential functions to preserve core temperature, a dangerous sign that hypothermia is setting in. Your vision is starting to blur, and you're having trouble maintaining your balance. The loss of blood from your wounded hands, combined with the cold and exhaustion, is pushing you toward collapse, but you can't stop. Edith's broken body at the edge of the field is a constant reminder of what happens to workers who can't keep up. Around 5:30, the church bell tolls again, marking another canonical hour. The sound seems to echo in your failing consciousness, a reminder that time is passing, but relief is still far away. The official end of the workday is still half an hour away, but in your condition, that might as well be an eternity. Your fellow workers are in similar condition. Several have collapsed and been dragged away like Edith. Others are working despite obvious injuries, broken bones, deep cuts, signs
bleeding.
of internal. The field has become a scene from hell, populated by the walking wounded who continue their labor because the alternative is death. The social hierarchy that governs this nightmare is rigid and unforgiving. At the top is the Lord, warm and comfortable in his manor house, counting the profits from your suffering. Below him is the overseer, well-fed and warmly dressed, enforcing the Lord's will with violence and intimidation. And at the bottom are your fellow peasants, ground down by a system that values you less than the animals you tend. The church, which should provide comfort and hope, instead reinforces this brutal system. The priests preach that your suffering is God's will, that your poverty is a test of faith, that your only hope lies in the afterlife. They tell you to be grateful for your lot, to accept your pain with humility, and to never question the divine order that keeps you in chains. But divine order feels like a cruel joke when your back is breaking and your hands are bleeding. The promise of heavenly reward seems hollow when you're watching your neighbor die from a beating for the crime of being too cold to work. Still, you cling to your faith because it's all you have. Without the hope of something better after death, existence would be truly meaningless. As 6 o'clock approaches, you realize that you're not going to make it through the day. Your body has reached its absolute limit, and you can feel yourself beginning to shut down. Your vision is tunneling, your hearing is muffled, and your movements are becoming increasingly erratic. You're on the verge of collapse, and you know that when it comes, it will be final. But somehow, you keep going. Some primitive survival instinct takes over, driving your body forward. Even when your conscious mind has given up, the whole rises and falls in a rhythm as automatic as breathing. You're no longer a human being. You're a machine, a tool for converting suffering into productivity. The church bell tolls 6 o'clock vespers, the evening prayer. The overseer finally calls an end to the day's labor, his voice carrying across the field like a reprieve from execution. You lean on your hoe, gasping for breath, your body shaking with exhaustion and cold. Tools away, the overseer shouts, but remember, you'll be back at dawn, and I expect better work tomorrow. You drop your hoe where you stand, your hands too damaged to maintain their grip any longer. Around you, your fellow workers are going through the same process of collapse. Their bodies finally allowed to acknowledge the punishment they've endured. The walk back to the village is a nightmare of pain and exhaustion. Your legs are shaking so badly that you can barely stand, let alone walk. Each step sends fresh waves of agony through your frozen feet, and you suspect that several toes are now completely frostbitten. The village comes into view as darkness begins to fall, its collection of hovels looking even more depressing. In the fading light, smoke rises from cooking fires, creating a gray haze that hangs over the settlement like a funeral shroud. The smell hits you before you reach the first houses. The same mixture of human waste, animal droppings, and unwashed bodies that defines medieval life. But right now, that smell represents home, promise of a few hours respite from the brutal demands of feudal labor. You stumble toward your hovel, your body operating on pure instinct now, driven by the desperate need for shelter and rest. The sun disappears behind the horizon, and true darkness begins to fall over the medieval world. But your ordeal is far from over. The real test, surviving a winter night in conditions that would kill most modern people, is just beginning. Your hovel comes into view, a pathetic structure of mud, sticks, and hope that somehow manages to stay upright despite the wind and weather. It's not much, but it's all you have, and right now represents the difference between life and death. You push open the wooden door, really just a collection of planks held together with rope and leather hinges, and stumble inside. The contrast with the outside cold is minimal, but even a few degrees of warmth feels like a blessing after the day's ordeal. Your family is waiting for you, huddled around the small fire in the center of the room. Your wife, Margaret, looks up as you enter, and her face goes white with shock at your condition. You must look like a walking corpse, covered in blood and dirt, shaking with exhaustion and cold, barely able to stand. "Sweet Mary," she whispers, her voice filled with horror. "What have they done to you?" You try to answer, but no words come. Your throat is raw from breathing cold air and dust, and your voice has been reduced to a hoarse croak. Instead, you simply collapse onto a three-legged stool by the hearth, your legs finally giving out after hours of supporting your weight on the frozen ground. The heat from the flames is both blessing and curse. As circulation slowly returns to your frozen extremities, the pain becomes excruciating. Your hands and feet throb with a deep burning ache that makes you want to scream, but you bite your tongue and endure it, knowing that the alternative, permanent damage from frostbite, would be even worse. Your children are huddled in the corner of the room, their eyes wide with fear as they take in your condition. Little Mary, your youngest at 5 years old, is coughing, a deep wet sound that you recognize as the beginning of lung fever. In a few days, she'll either recover or die, and there's nothing you can do to influence the outcome. Your son, John, 5 years old, looks like he's aged years since this morning. The sight of his father's suffering has stripped away what little innocence he had left, forcing him to confront the brutal realities of the world he's been born into. Agnes, your 12-year-old daughter, is trying to comfort her younger siblings while helping her mother tend to your wounds. The single room that serves as your entire world feels smaller than ever. In the flickering firelight, the animals that share your living space, a pig, some chickens, and a goat, if you're fortunate enough to own one, seem to take up more room than they should, their presence a constant reminder of how little space you have for human comfort. These animals are more than just livestock. They're your insurance policy against starvation and your only source of warmth beyond the meager fire. The pig will eventually be slaughtered and salted for winter meat. The chickens provide eggs and occasional meat. The goat gives milk that can be drunk fresh or made into cheese. But tonight, they serve another purpose. Their body heat helps warm the space, though it comes at the cost of hygiene and air quality. The smell is overwhelming, a mixture of animal waste, human sweat, smoke, and the metallic
of your
scent.
blood.
But this is normal. This is what medieval peasant homes smell like. Everyone lives with these odors because there's no alternative. Margaret brings you a clay cup filled with warm ale, and you drink it greedily despite the pain it causes your raw throat. The liquid is weak and sour, but it's warm, and that's all that matters. She also brings a bowl of water and begins to clean your wounds. Her touch, gentle but necessarily painful as she removes the dirt and debris that has accumulated in the cuts. Your hands are destroyed, The palms are raw meat now, with strips of skin hanging loose and blood flowing freely. Several fingers don't respond properly when you try to move them. The tendons may be severed or the damage from cold and trauma may be too severe for normal function. These hands, which have been your tools for survival, may never work properly again. The implications are terrifying. In medieval times, a man who can't work with his hands is essentially useless. There's no disability support, no alternative employment, no safety net of any kind. Hands don't heal properly, your family will starve. It's that simple and that brutal. Margaret begins applying a pus made from herbs and animal fat to your wounds. The mixture stings terribly, but she knows it's the only chance you have of preventing infection. In a world without antibiotics, even minor cuts can become life-threatening if they become infected. Your hands, with their deep lacerations and exposure to dirt and filth, are prime candidates for sepsis. As she works, the reality of your situation becomes clear. You've survived the workday, but barely. Your body is broken. Your hands may be permanently damaged, and you still have to face the long winter night ahead. The temperature outside is continuing to drop, and your Havel offers minimal protection against the elements. The walls around you are made of wattle and daub sticks woven together and plastered with mud, straw, and animal dung. The dung wasn't added for cruelty, it was actually a practical choice. It helped bind the mixture and provided insulation, but practical doesn't mean effective. You can see daylight through gaps in the construction, and the wind whistles through constantly. There are no windows in your Havel. Glass is a luxury reserved for churches and the homes of the wealthy. Instead, you have small openings covered with oiled cloth or animal hide that does little to keep out the wind. The cold air seeps through every crack and crevice, making the interior only marginally warmer than the outside. Your floor is packed earth, cold and slightly damp from the night's condensation. In winter, it might be frozen solid. You've thrown down some straw for insulation, but it's thin and worn, offering little protection against the cold radiating up from the ground. The fire in the center of the room is your only real defense against the cold, but it's pathetically inadequate. There's no chimney. Smoke simply rises and hopefully finds its way out through holes in the thatched roof. More often than not, it just hangs in the air, making your eyes water and your throat burn. But that smoke serves a purpose beyond the minimal warmth it provides. It helps preserve any meat hanging from the rafters and keeps insects at bay. Margaret has prepared what passes for supper in your household: more pottage, the eternal peasant meal. This evening's version contains some barley, few withered turnipses, and if you're very lucky, small piece of salted pork for flavoring. It's been simmering over the fire since before you return home, slowly cooking into a gray, lumpy mass that looks about as appetizing as it sounds. You eat the pottage with a wooden spoon, trying not to think too hard about what might be in it. The barley is coarse and gritty, the turnipses are mushy and flavorless, and the pork is so salty, it makes your eyes water. But it's hot, it's filling, and it will give you the energy you need to survive the night ahead. Your stomach, shrunken from chronic hunger, feels full after just a few spoonfuls, but you force yourself to finish the entire bowl. You need every calorie you can get for the long, cold hours ahead. Your body will burn through this meager meal quickly, trying to generate enough heat to keep you alive until morning. As you eat, Margaret tells you about her day, a litany of small struggles and minor victories that make up the life of a medieval woman. She spent the morning spinning thread from the small amount of wool your family managed to acquire, work that requires steady hands and good eyesight. The thread she produces will be woven into cloth that can be sold or traded for other necessities. In the afternoon, she tended the small garden plot behind your havel, trying to coax life from the frozen ground. The vegetables she grows, turnips, onions, cabbages, provide essential nutrition for your family, but the yield is always uncertain. Too much rain, or an invasion of pests, can destroy an entire season's work in a matter of days. She also spent time caring for the animals that share your living space. The pig needs to be fed and watered. The chickens require attention, and the goat must be milked. These animals are more than just livestock. They're your insurance policy against starvation, but maintaining them is a constant struggle. Feed is expensive, scarce, and often disease can wipe out your entire investment in a matter of days. Theft is a constant threat. Hungry neighbors have been known to steal animals in the dead of night, and there's little you can do to stop them. Margaret also tells you about the village gossip she heard while drawing water from the well. Edith, the woman who was beaten by the overseer, died shortly after being dragged from the field. Her 6 children are already begging for food from the other families, but everyone is struggling to feed their own. There's also news of the Lord's latest demands. He's planning to increase the corv labor requirement from 3 days a week to 4, claiming that his fields need more attention. This means less time for you to work your own plot, less opportunity to grow food for your family, less chance of survival, but there's nothing you can do about it. The Lord's word is law, and peasants who object to his demands quickly find themselves homeless, or worse. The church is also demanding higher tithes this year. The priest claims that the bishop needs more money for repairs to the cathedral, but everyone knows that most of the money will end up in the pockets of corrupt officials. Still, refusing to pay tithes is considered a sin, and excommunication means social death. Medieval village. As Margaret talks, you become aware of the sounds around you. Your children are coughing. All of them have the persistent hack that comes from breathing smoke and cold air. The animals are stirring restlessly, sensing the tension in the room. Outside you can hear the sounds of the village settling in for the night. Doors closing, fires being banked, the occasional cry of a baby or the bark of a dog. But underneath it all is a more ominous sound. The wind. It's picking up now, howling around the corners of your havel and finding every gap in the walls. The temperature is dropping steadily, and you know that the real test is just beginning. The fire in the center of the room is beginning to die down, and Margaret adds another precious piece of wood to keep it burning. Fuel is expensive and hard to come by, but she knows that letting the fire die would be a death sentence for the family. The temperature inside the havel is barely above freezing, and without the fire's warmth, you would all freeze to death before morning. Your body is beginning to react to the day's trauma. The adrenaline that kept you going through the brutal labor is wearing off, and you're starting to feel the full extent of your injuries. Your back is seizing up from the constant bending and the jarring impact of the hoe against frozen ground. Your shoulders ache from the repetitive swinging motion. Your legs are cramping from standing on the frozen earth for hours. But it's your hands that worry you the most. They're swollen to twice their normal size, and the skin has turned a mottled black and blue. That signals severe tissue damage. When you try to flex your fingers, the pain is so intense that you nearly black out. You may have permanent nerve damage, which would make it impossible to grip tools or perform the manual labor that your survival depends on. Margaret notices your distress and brings you a Small clay pot filled with a mixture of animal fat and herbs. For your hands, she says simply. The salve is a luxury. Fat is precious and herbs are expensive. But she knows you need to be able to use your hands if the family is going to survive. You try to apply the greasy mixture to your palms, but your fingers won't obey your commands. Margaret has to do it for you, her touch as gentle as possible, but still causing waves of agony to shoot up your arms. The fat will provide some protection against infection, and the herbs might help with the pain, but you both know that the damage may be permanent. As the evening progresses, your condition continues to deteriorate. The warmth from the fire has brought feeling back to your extremities, and with it comes the realization of just how badly you've been injured. Your feet are in even worse condition than your hands. Several toes are completely black, indicating that the tissue has died from frostbite. In the morning, if you survive the night, you'll have to decide whether to try to save the damaged toes or amputate them to prevent gangrene from spreading. It's a decision that could mean the difference between life and death, but it's one you'll have to make with no medical training and no proper tools. The church bell tolls 7 o'clock. Compline, the final prayer of the day. In monasteries across Europe, gathering to sing the last office before retiring to their warm cells. But in your hole, the real struggle is just beginning. The temperature outside has dropped well below freezing, and it's going to get much colder before dawn. Your family begins the nightly ritual of preparing for sleep, though sleep is a generous term for what you'll experience over the next 12 hours. Margaret banks the fire carefully, covering the coals with ash to preserve them through the night. If the fire dies completely, you'll have to rekindle it from flint and steel. A difficult task under the best of circumstances, potentially impossible. With your damaged hands, your children huddle together on a straw mattress that serves as the family bed. There's no privacy in a medieval peasant home. Everyone sleeps in the same room, often in the same bed, sharing body heat and whatever blankets and cloaks you can gather. The mattress itself is a crude affair, a wooden frame with rope stretched across it, topped with a sack stuffed with straw. The straw is old and compressed, offering little cushioning against the hard frame beneath. It's also home to a thriving ecosystem of fleas, lice, and other parasites that will feast on your blood throughout the night. You lie down carefully, every movement sending fresh waves of pain through your damaged body. Margaret lies beside you, her body providing what little warmth she can. Your children press close on either side, their small bodies shivering despite the shared warmth. The animals in the room settle down as well, but they're restless. They can sense the dropping temperature and the approaching storm. The pig grunts and shifts in its corner. The chickens ruffle their feathers in the rafters, and the goat bellies softly in distress. Outside, the wind is howling now, driving snow against the walls of your havel with increasing fury. You can hear the thatch on your roof creaking and shifting, and you pray that it will hold through the night. If the roof fails, you'll be exposed to the full fury of the winter storm, and that would be a death sentence for your entire family. The temperature inside the havel continues to drop. Your breath forms clouds in the frigid air, and you can feel the cold seeping through the thin walls like water through a sea. The fire provides a small circle of warmth, but beyond that circle, the cold reigns supreme. This is when the real battle begins, not just against the cold, but against despair. The night stretches ahead of you like an eternity of suffering, and you know that many people won't survive until dawn. In villages across medieval Europe, families are huddling together in similar havels, fighting the same desperate battle against the elements. Some will lose. By morning, there will be bodies to bury. Families destroyed by the simple act of trying to sleep through a winter night. Children will freeze to death in their parents' arms. Elderly people will simply stop breathing, their bodies unable to generate enough heat to sustain life. Even healthy adults will succumb to hypothermia, their core temperature dropping below the point of no return. But you're not dead yet. You're still breathing, still fighting, still clinging to life with desperate determination. Your family needs you, and that knowledge gives you the strength to endure whatever the night might bring. The wind howls louder now, and you can hear something, branches perhaps, or loose thatch, striking the walls of your havel. The sound is like the beating of giant wings, as if some monstrous bird is trying to tear your shelter apart and expose you to the killing cold. Your children whimper in their sleep, their small bodies pressed against yours for warmth. Margaret's breathing is shallow and rapid. She's trying to conserve energy while staying alert for any signs of danger. The animals are quiet now, conserving their strength for the long night ahead. This is medieval winter in all its brutal reality. No central heating, and no insulation, no protection against the elements beyond what you can build with your own hands from whatever materials you can scavenge. Just human bodies huddled together against the darkness, fighting for survival, one breath at a time. The night is young, and the worst is yet to come, but you've survived this long, and that's something, in a world where death is always just one cold night away. It through another hour is a victory worth celebrating. The fire crackles softly in the center of the room, its light dancing on the soot-stained walls. Outside, the storm rages with increasing fury, but inside your humble havel, life continues its stubborn struggle against the forces that would extinguish it. You close your eyes and try to rest, knowing that you'll need every ounce of strength for the long, cold hours ahead. The real test of your endurance is just beginning, and only time will tell if you have what it takes to see another dawn. The church bell tolls 8 o'clock, its bronze voice barely audible above the howling wind that now batters your havel with the fury of a living thing. The storm that was merely threatening an hour ago has arrived in full force, and with it comes a cold so intense that it seems to have weight and substance pressing down on your family like a malevolent presence. You lie on the straw mattress, your body racked with pain from the day's brutal labor, listening to the wind tear at the thatch above your head. Each gust sends a shower of debris down into the room, bits of straw, dust, and occasionally larger pieces that strike the floor with ominous thuds. The roof is holding for now, but you can hear it groaning under the assault, and you know that it's only a matter of time before something gives way. The temperature inside your havel has dropped dramatically since sunset. What little warmth the fire provided is being sucked away by the wind that finds every crack and crevice in your walls. Your breath forms thick clouds that hang in the air like fog, and you can feel ice crystals forming on the inside of the walls, where your exhalations freeze against the cold stone and mud. Your children are pressed against you, and Margaret, their small bodies shivering uncontrollably despite the shared warmth. Little Mary's cough has gotten worse throughout the evening, and you can hear the wet, rattling sound that signals fluid building up in her lungs. She's burning with fever, her small body fighting a losing battle against the lung sickness that claims so many children during the harsh winter months. John, your 8-year-old son, is trying to be brave, but you can feel his body trembling against yours. He's too young to understand the full gravity of your situation, but old enough to sense the fear that permeates the room like smoke. Agnes, your 12-year-old daughter, lies on the other side of Margaret, her eyes wide open in the firelight, watching and listening to every sound. The animals that share your living space are growing. Increasingly agitated, the pig has been grunting and shifting restlessly in its corner, sensing the dropping temperature and the approaching danger. The chickens in the rafters are huddled together, their feathers fluffed out in a desperate attempt to retain body heat. Even the goat, normally placid, is bleating softly in distress. Margaret gets up carefully, trying not to disturb the children, and adds another precious piece of wood to the fire. The flames flicker higher for a moment, casting dancing shadows on the walls, but you both know that your supply of fuel is limited. You have perhaps enough wood to last until midnight, maybe a little longer if you're careful. After that, you'll be dependent on whatever heat you can generate with your own bodies. How are your hands? Margaret asks quietly, settling back down beside you. You try to flex your fingers, but the pain is excruciating. The swelling has gotten worse throughout the evening, and your hands now look like grotesque parodies of their former selves. Bloated, discolored, and completely useless. You can't grip anything, can't make a fist, can barely move your fingers at all. Bad. You whisper, your voice hoarse from breathing the cold air. I don't think they're going to heal, right? Margaret nods grimly. She's seen injuries like this before, and she knows what they mean. Without the use of your hands, you can't work, and without work, the family has no income. It's a death sentence. Delivered in slow motion, a gradual slide towards starvation and homelessness that could take months to complete. But that's a problem for tomorrow, if you survive the night. Right now, the immediate threat is the cold, which continues to seep into the room. Despite your best efforts to keep it out, the wind has found a loose board in the wall near your feet, and you can feel the icy air flowing through the gap like water through a broken dam. Margaret stuffs some rags into the opening, but it's a temporary solution at best. The wind simply finds other ways in, whistling through gaps you didn't even know existed. Your hovel, which seemed sturdy enough during the day, is revealing itself to be little more than a collection of sticks and mud, held together by hope and desperation. The sound of the storm is becoming overwhelming. The wind howls like a pack of wolves, punctuated by the crash of falling branches and the creak of straining timbers. Somewhere in the village, you hear the sound of a roof collapsing, a sharp crack followed by screams that are quickly swallowed by the wind. Another family has lost their shelter, and in this weather, that means they've probably lost their lives as well. Your own roof continues to hold, but barely. You can see the rafters flexing with each gust of wind, and occasionally a piece of thatch breaks loose and falls into the room. The hole it leaves behind lets in more cold air, and you know that if too many pieces fall, the entire structure could collapse. Around 9 o'clock, disaster strikes. A particularly violent gust of wind tears away a section of thatch the door, creating a gap large enough for snow to blow directly into the room. The temperature drops immediately, and the fire gutters and nearly dies as the wind swirls around the small space. Margaret leaps up and tries to stuff the hole with whatever material she can find. Old clothes, straw, even pieces of the wooden furniture, but the wind is too strong, and everything she puts in place is immediately blown away. Snow begins to accumulate on the floor, and you realize with growing horror that your shelter is failing. We need to block it somehow, Margaret says, her voice tight with panic. If we can't stop the wind, we'll all freeze. You try to get up to help, but your body won't obey. The combination of exhaustion, injury, and cold has left you barely able to move. Your legs feel like lead, and when you try to stand, you immediately collapse back onto the mattress. Agnes, despite being only 12 years old, takes charge of the situation. Grabs the three-legged stool that serves as your only piece of furniture and wedges it against the hole, then piles whatever she can find on top of it. It's not a perfect solution, but it reduces the flow of cold air, enough to keep the fire from dying completely, but the damage is done. The temperature in the room has dropped even further, and you can see your breath forming thick clouds with every exhalation. Your children are shivering violently now, their small bodies unable to generate enough heat to stay warm. Little Mary's lips are turning blue, and her breathing is becoming increasingly labored. This is when you realize that you might not all survive the night. The cold is no longer just uncomfortable, it's becoming lethal. Hypothermia is setting in, and without adequate heat, your family's core temperatures will continue to drop until your bodies simply shut down. Margaret seems to come to the same realization. She looks at you with eyes full of fear and desperation, and you can see her calculating the odds, trying to figure out how to keep everyone alive until morning. The mathematics of survival are brutal and unforgiving. You have limited fuel, limited food, and unlimited cold. We need to stay together, she says quietly, all of us as close as possible. Share our body heat. It's the only strategy available to you, and it's one that medieval families have used for centuries. When external heat sources fail, human bodies become the last line of defense against the killing cold. You pull your children closer, arranging them so that the smallest are in the center where they'll be warmest, with the adults on the outside providing protection. The animals seem to understand the gravity of the situation as well. The pig has moved closer to the fire, and the goat has actually approached the family bed, something it's never done before. Even the chickens have come down from the rafters, huddling on the floor near the dying flames. You create a living pile of bodies, human and animal, all pressed together in a desperate attempt to conserve heat. It's not dignified, it's not comfortable, but it might be the difference between life and death. Your children stop shivering as much, and you can feel some warmth returning to their small bodies, but you're still losing the battle. The fire is burning lower, despite Margaret's careful tending, and you know that you're running out of fuel. Each piece of wood you add to the flames is one less piece for the long hours ahead. But without the fire, you'll all be dead within hours. The wind continues to howl outside, and you can hear other sounds. Now, the crash of falling trees, the screams of animals caught in the storm, the distant sound of church bells being blown from their towers. This isn't just a winter storm, it's a catastrophe that's destroying everything in its path. Your village is being torn apart by forces beyond human control, and you're powerless to do anything but huddle in your failing shelter and hope that morning comes before the cold claims you. Other families are going through the same ordeal, fighting the same desperate battle against the elements, and many of them are losing. The social hierarchy that governs your daily life means nothing in the face of the storm. Lords and peasants alike are at the mercy of the weather, though the lords have better shelters, more fuel, and warmer clothes. But even they are not immune to the killing power of a medieval winter night. Around 9:30, you hear a sound that chills you to the bone. The cry of a baby somewhere in the village, growing weaker and more distant, until it finally stops altogether. Another life claimed by the cold. Another family destroyed by the simple act of trying to survive a winter night. Your own children are still alive, but barely. Mary's fever is getting worse, and her breathing is becoming increasingly shallow. John has stopped talking altogether, conserving his energy for the basic act of staying alive. Agnes continues to help Margaret tend the fire and adjust the makeshift barrier against the hole in the roof, but you can see that she's weakening as well. The fire burns lower, and Margaret makes the agonizing decision to add another piece of wood. It's one of the last pieces you have, but without it, the flames will die completely, and that will be the end for all of you. The wood catches quickly, sending up a brief flare of warmth and light, but you know it won't last long. Your body is beginning to shut down. Your extremities are completely numb now, and you can't feel your hands or feet at all. This is a dangerous sign. It means that your body is redirecting blood flow away from your limbs to protect your vital organs. If the process continues, you'll lose fingers and toes to frostbite, assuming you survive long enough for that to matter. Your thinking is becoming sluggish as well, another sign that hypothermia is setting in. Simple decisions become difficult, and you find yourself staring at the fire for long periods without really seeing it. Your body is conserving energy by shutting down non-essential functions, including parts of your brain. Margaret notices your condition and shakes you gently. Stay awake, she whispers urgently. Don't go to sleep. If you sleep now, you might not wake up. She's right. Of course, sleep in these conditions would be fatal. Your body temperature would continue to drop, and you'd slip into a coma from which you'd never recover. But staying awake requires energy that you don't have, and the temptation to close your eyes and drift away is almost overwhelming. The church bell tolls 10 o'clock, though the sound is almost lost in the howling of the wind. You've been fighting this battle for 4 hours now, and you still have 8 more to go before dawn. The night feels endless, a frozen eternity of suffering that stretches ahead of you like a prison sentence. Your fuel is almost gone. Margaret counts the remaining pieces of wood, perhaps enough for another hour, too. She's very careful. After that, you'll be dependent entirely on body heat and whatever protection your failing shelter can provide. The hole in the roof has gotten larger despite Agnes' efforts to patch it. More snow is blowing in, and the temperature continues to drop. You estimate that it's now well below zero inside your havel, and it's going to get much colder before morning. This is when you begin to understand why so many people don't survive medieval winters. It's not just the cold, it's the relentless grinding nature of it, the way it saps your strength and your will to live horby hour. You're not just fighting for your life, you're fighting for your sanity, your hope, your basic humanity, but you're still alive. And that's something. Your family is still breathing, still clinging to life despite the impossible odds. Margaret continues to tend the fire with the dedication of a priestess, maintaining a sacred flame. Your children huddle close, drawing strength from your presence, even as you draw strength from theirs. The animals, too, are still alive, their warm bodies adding precious heat to the small space. The pig's bulk provides a windbreak against the drafts, and the goat's body heat helps warm the air around the family bed. Even the chickens huddled together on the floor contribute their small share to the collective effort to survive. Outside, the storm rages on with undiminished fury. Trees are falling, roofs are collapsing, and people are dying. But inside your humble havel, life continues its stubborn struggle against the forces that would extinguish it. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to gather your strength for the long hours ahead. The fire crackles softly, its light dancing on the faces of your family. Margaret's hand finds yours, her touch gentle despite the cold that numbs your skin. We'll make it, she whispers, though you can hear the doubt in her voice. We'll see the morning. You want to believe her, want to have faith that your family will survive this ordeal, but you've seen too many winters, buried too many neighbors to have any illusions about your chances. Medieval. Winter nights are killers, and this one is shaping up to be worse than most. Still, you're not dead. Yet, you're still fighting, still breathing, still hoping against hope that dawn will come before the cold claims you. And in a world where survival is never guaranteed, that's all anyone can ask for. The wind howls louder. The fire burns lower, and the night stretches ahead like an endless tunnel of cold and darkness. But you're still here, still alive, still refusing to give up. The real test is just beginning. The church bell tolls. 10 o'clock. Its bronze voice nearly swallowed by the howling wind that now sounds like the screams of the damned. The storm has reached its full fury, and your Havel shudders with each gust like a living thing in its death throes. The temperature has dropped so low that your breath doesn't just form clouds, it creates ice. Crystals that fall to the floor with tiny tinkling sounds. Your fire is dying. Despite Margaret's careful rationing, you're down to your last few pieces of wood, and each one represents perhaps 30 minutes of life-sustaining warmth. The flames that once danced cheerfully in the center of the room have been reduced to a few flickering tongues of orange and blue, barely visible through the smoke that can no longer find its way out through the damaged roof. The hole that Agnes patched earlier has grown larger, and snow is now blowing steadily into the room, accumulating in drifts against the walls. The temperature inside your hove has dropped to match the outside air, well below zero, cold enough to kill within hours. Your shelter, which seemed adequate during the day, has become little more than a windbreak. Your children are in serious trouble. Little Mary's fever has broken, but not in a good way. Her body temperature has dropped so low that she's no longer capable of generating heat. Through illness, she lies motionless between you and Margaret, her breathing so shallow that you have to put your ear to her chest to make sure she's still alive. Her lips are blue, her skin is waxy and pale, and her pulse is barely detectable. John has stopped shivering, which is the most dangerous sign of all. When the body stops shivering, it means that hypothermia has progressed to a critical stage. His core temperature has dropped below the point where his muscles can function properly, and his body is shutting down non-essential systems to preserve what little heat remains. Agnes, despite being the oldest, is actually in the best condition of your children. Her larger body mass gives her more reserves to draw on, and she's been helping Margaret tend the fire, which has kept her more active and warmer than her siblings. But even she is showing signs of severe hypothermia, confusion, slurred speech, and the telltale drowsiness that precedes unconsciousness. Margaret herself own is body failing. Heat to She's warm the children. She's been using her, sacrificing her own survival for theirs in the way that mothers have done throughout history. Her hands are so cold that she can barely manipulate the pieces of wood, and her movements have become slow and clumsy. You try to help, but your own condition has deteriorated dramatically. Your hands are completely useless now, swollen, discolored, and numb. You can't feel your feet at all, and when you try to move your legs, they respond sluggishly, if at all. Your thinking is becoming increasingly muddled, and you find yourself losing track of time and place. This is severe hypothermia, and you know it. Your core body temperature has dropped below 90 F, and your body is beginning the process of shutting down. Your heart rate has slowed, your breathing has become shallow, and your blood pressure is dropping. Without immediate warming, you'll be dead within hours. But there is no immediate warming available. You've burned through most of your fuel. Your shelter is failing, and the storm outside shows no signs of abating. You're trapped in a death trap of your own making, and there's nothing you can do but wait for the inevitable end. The animals are suffering as well. The pig, which had been grunting and moving restlessly earlier, has now fallen silent and still. You're not sure if it's dead or simply conserving energy, but its lack of movement is ominous. The chickens have stopped their soft clucking entirely, huddled together in a feathered mass that barely rises and falls with their breathing. Even the goat, the hardiest of your animals, stands motionless with its head hanging low, frost forming on its whiskers. Around 10:30, Margaret makes a desperate decision. She takes one of the last pieces of wood, a thick branch that she's been saving for the deepest part of the night, and places it on the dying fire. The flames leap higher for a moment, casting welcome warmth and light throughout the small space. But you both know it's a temporary reprieve. We need to burn something else, she says, her voice barely audible above the wind. The furniture, our clothes, anything that will burn. You nod weakly, understanding the logic, even as you recognize the futility. The three-legged stool that serves as your only furniture would provide perhaps 20 minutes of heat. Your spare clothes, what few you have, might add another half hour. But after that, there would be nothing left to burn, except the wooden frame of your bed, and without that you'd be sleeping directly on the frozen ground. Agnes, showing remarkable presence of mind for a 12-year-old in the grip of hypothermia, begins gathering anything combustible she can find. A wooden bowl cracked and worn from years of use, a handful of straw from the mattress, even some of the dried herbs hanging from the rafters, though they'll burn quickly and provide little heat. Each item she feeds to the fire buys you a few more minutes of life, but you're fighting a losing battle. The cold is infinite, relentless, patient. It doesn't need to hurry. It knows that eventually you'll run out of things to burn, and then it will claim you. The wind finds new ways into your havel with each passing hour. A board loosens near the door, creating another gap for the icy air to pour through. Part of the wall near your feet begins to crumble, the mud and dung mortar having frozen and cracked. Your shelter is literally falling apart around you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Around 11 o'clock, you hear a sound that makes your blood run cold. The crash of a roof collapsing somewhere nearby, followed by screams that are quickly cut short. Another family has lost their battle against the storm, and you know that their fate could easily be yours. Your own roof continues to hold, but you can hear the timbers groaning with each gust of wind. The psychological toll is almost as devastating as the physical one. The darkness seems absolute, broken only by the fading glow of your fire. The cold has a weight to it, pressing down on you like a living thing. The sound of the wind is maddening, a constant howl that drowns out thought and makes communication nearly impossible. Your children have stopped talking entirely now, conserving what little energy they have left. Mary lies motionless, her breathing so faint that you're not sure she's still alive. John has curled into a tight ball, his body instinctively trying to minimize heat loss. Agnes continues to help Margaret with the fire, but her movements are becoming increasingly uncoordinated. This is when desperation drives you to consider the unthinkable. You look at the animals sharing your space and realize that they represent not just companionship and future food, but immediate fuel. The pig alone would burn for hours, providing enough heat to potentially see you through to dawn. The chickens and goat would add precious additional time, but these animals are more than just emergency fuel. They're your livelihood, your insurance against starvation, your only hope of surviving the winter, even if you make it through this night. Burning them would mean trading a quick death by freezing for a slow death by starvation. It's a choice no human being should have to make, but medieval life is full of such impossible decisions. Margaret seems to read your thoughts. She looks at the pig, then at your dying children, and you can see the calculation in her eyes. The animal's life against her children's lives. It's not really a choice at all. Not yet. She whispers, let's wait a little longer. Maybe the storm will break, but you both know the storm isn't going to break. If anything, it's getting worse. The wind is howling with increased fury, and you can hear debris, branches, pieces of thatch, possibly even parts of other buildings striking your walls with increasing frequency. Bell tolls 11 o'clock, though the sound is almost completely lost in the chaos of the storm. You've been fighting this battle for 5 hours now, and you still have 7 more to go before dawn. The mathematics of survival are becoming increasingly grim. You have perhaps an hour's worth of fuel left, and the temperature continues to drop. Your body is beginning to shut down in earnest now. Your heart rate has slowed to a dangerous level, and your breathing has become so shallow that Margaret has to watch your chest carefully to make sure you're still alive. Your skin has taken on a waxy gray pallor, and your pulse is barely detectable. This is the point where many people simply give up. The cold, the pain, the hopelessness of the situation combined to create a kind of peaceful surrender. Your body stops fighting, your mind stops struggling, and you drift away into a sleep from which you'll never wake. It would be easy, almost pleasant, to simply close your eyes and let go, but something keeps you fighting. Perhaps the sound of your children's labored breathing, perhaps Margaret's hand in yours, perhaps just the stubborn human refusal to accept defeat. You force yourself to stay conscious, to keep your eyes open, to continue the struggle even when every instinct tells you to surrender. Around 11:30, disaster strikes. Again, a particularly violent gust of wind tears away another section of your roof. This one directly above the fire. Snow begins pouring in, and the flames hiss and sputter as the frozen precipitation hits the burning wood. For a terrifying moment, you think the fire is going to die completely, but Margaret quickly shields it with her body, while Agnes tries to patch the new hole. The damage is severe. More cold air is now flowing into the room, and the fire is struggling to stay alive. You're losing heat faster than you can generate it, and your core temperature continues to drop. You estimate that you have perhaps 2 hours left before hypothermia claims you, and that's assuming the fire doesn't die completely. Margaret makes another desperate decision. She takes the wooden bowl that Agnes had been saving and throws it into the fire. The dry wood catches quickly, providing a brief flare of heat and light. Then she adds a handful of straw from the mattress, then some of the dried herbs from the rafters. Each item burns quickly, providing only minutes of warmth. But those minutes are precious. They're the difference between life and death, between seeing another dawn and becoming another casualty of the medieval winter. Your children are barely conscious now. Mary hasn't moved in over an hour, and you're not sure she's still breathing. John's lips have turned blue, and his skin feels cold to the touch. Agnes is still helping Margaret, but her movements are becoming increasingly erratic and confused. This is when you realize that you're probably going to lose at least one of your children tonight. The thought is almost unbearable, but you force yourself to face it. In medieval times, child mortality is a fact of life, and winter nights like this are. When the Grim Reaper comes calling, the question becomes which child to try to save. Do you focus your remaining resources on Mary, the youngest and most vulnerable, on John, the only boy and your potential heir, on Agnes, the oldest and most likely to survive? It's a choice that no parent should have to make, but medieval life is full of such cruel calculations. Margaret seems to come to the same realization. She looks at each of your children in turn, her face a mask of anguish and desperation. Then she makes a decision. that will haunt her for the rest of her life, however long that might be. She pulls Mary, the youngest, closer to the fire, using her own body to shield the child from the worst of the cold. It's a practical decision. Mary is the most vulnerable and the most likely to die without immediate attention. But it also means that John and Agnes will receive less warmth, less protection, less chance of survival. The fire burns lower, and Margaret adds another piece of precious fuel, a wooden spoon that she's carved herself from a piece of oak. It burns quickly, but the heat it provides might be enough to keep Mary alive for another hour. Around midnight, the church bell tolls 12 times, marking the deepest, darkest hour of the night. In medieval folklore, this is when the veil between the living and the dead is thinnest, when spirits walk the earth and demons prey on the weak. Tonight, those demons seem very real indeed. The temperature has dropped even further, and your breath now freezes instantly when it leaves your mouth, creating a thin layer of ice on your lips and chin. The fire is barely alive, just a few glowing coals that provide more psychological comfort than actual heat. Your body is shutting down system by system. Your kidneys have stopped functioning properly, and you can feel toxins building up in your bloodstream. Your liver is struggling to process the waste products of your failing metabolism. Your brain is becoming increasingly starved of oxygen as your circulation slows. This is the point where many medieval peasants simply died in their sleep, their bodies unable to maintain the basic functions necessary for life. It would be a peaceful end, all things considered. A gradual slide into unconsciousness followed by cardiac arrest. No pain, no struggle, just a quiet sensation of existence. But you're not ready to die yet. Your family needs you, and that knowledge gives you the strength to continue fighting. Even when your body wants to surrender, you force yourself to stay awake, to keep breathing, to maintain whatever heat you can generate through sheer force of will. Margaret continues her desperate efforts to keep the fire alive. She's burning everything she can find now. Pieces of clothing, scraps of leather, even some of the straw from the walls. Each item provides only minutes of heat, but those minutes are precious beyond measure. The animals are in their final stages as well. The pig has been motionless for over an hour, and you're fairly certain it's dead. The chickens are huddled together in a mass of feathers, barely breathing. The goat is still standing, but its head hangs low, and its breathing is labored. Around 12:30, Margaret makes the ultimate sacrifice. She begins removing her own clothes, feeding them piece to the dying fire. First her outer cloak, then her woolen dress, then even her linen undergarments. She's left wearing only her shift, her body exposed to the killing cold. But the burning clothes provide precious minutes of warmth for her children. It's an act of pure maternal love, the kind of sacrifice that defines the human spirit at its best. She's literally burning her own protection to keep her children alive, trading her own survival for theirs without hesitation. The clothes burn quickly, but they provide enough heat to bring some color back to Mary's lips, and to make John stir slightly. Agnes, seeing what her mother has done, begins removing her own clothes as well, adding them to the fire despite Margaret's protests. You try to do the same, but your hands are too damaged to manipulate the fastenings of your clothes. Margaret has to help you, her frozen fingers struggling with the leather ties and wooden buttons. Soon, you're all nearly naked, huddled together around the dying fire like primitive humans in a cave. The irony isn't lost on you. Despite all the advances of medieval civilization, the great cathedrals, the complex social systems, the elaborate codes of chivalry, you've been reduced to the level of human existence. You're animals fighting for survival using the most primitive methods available to stay alive. But you're still alive, And that's something. Your family is still breathing, still clinging to existence, despite the impossible odds. The fire fed by your sacrifices burns a little brighter for a few precious minutes. The wind continues to howl outside, and you can hear the sounds of destruction all around you. Trees falling, buildings collapsing, animals crying out in distress. Your village is being torn apart by forces beyond human control, and you're powerless to do anything but huddle in your failing shelter and hope that morning comes before the cold claims you. Around 1 o'clock, you hear a sound that chills you to the bone. Human voices crying out in the storm. Someone else is in trouble. Perhaps a family whose shelter has failed completely, wandering in the deadly cold, looking for help. But there's nothing you can do for them. You can barely keep your own family alive, let alone help others. The voices grow fainter and then disappear entirely, swallowed by the wind. You'll never know who they were or what happened to them. But you can guess. In conditions like these, exposure kills quickly. They probably have minutes left to live, if they're not dead already. Your own situation continues to deteriorate. The fire is down to its last few coals, and you have nothing left to burn except the wooden frame of your bed. Margaret looks at it longingly, knowing that it would provide perhaps an hour of heat, but also knowing that without it, you'd be sleeping directly on the frozen ground. The decision is made for her when another section of the roof collapses, this one directly above the bed. Snow pours in, and the wooden frame is quickly buried under a pile of frozen debris. Even if you could dig it out, it would be too wet to burn effectively. You're down to your last resources now. Body heat and whatever protection your failing shelter can provide. Margaret pulls all of you closer together, creating a tight huddle of human bodies in a desperate attempt to conserve warmth. The children are in the center with you and Margaret on the outside, providing what protection you can. The animals, those that are still alive, press close as well. The goat actually lies down next to the family group, its warm body adding precious heat to the collective effort. Even some of the chickens, driven by instinct, huddle against your legs. This is survival at its most basic level. A group of living beings pressed together against the darkness, sharing whatever warmth they can generate, refusing to surrender to the forces that would destroy them. It's not dignified, it's not comfortable, but it might be enough to see you through to dawn. The church bell tolls 1 o'clock, though the sound is barely audible above the storm. You've been fighting this battle for 7 hours now, and you still have 5 more to go. The night feels endless, a frozen eternity of suffering that stretches ahead of you like a prison sentence. But you're still alive. Your family is still breathing. The fire may be dying, your shelter may be failing, but the human spirit burns on, fueled by love and hope, and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The wind howls louder, the cold grows more intense, but you continue to fight, because in the end, that's all you can do. Fight for every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of life that you can steal from the darkness. The night is far from over, but you've made it this far, and sometimes in the depths of medieval winter, that's victory enough. Around 1:30, something changes. The wind, which has been howling with constant fury for hours, begins to shift direction. Coming from the north, bringing the full force of the Arctic cold, it starts to come from the west, carrying with it a slightly different quality of air. It's still brutally cold, still life-threatening, but there's a subtle difference that gives you a tiny spark of hope. Perhaps the worst of the storm is passing. Perhaps the temperature has bottomed out and will begin to rise, however, slightly as dawn approaches, but that's still hours away, and you're not sure you have hours left. Your body temperature has dropped so low that your heart is struggling to maintain circulation. Your breathing has become so shallow that Margaret has to put her ear to your chest to make sure you're still alive. Your children are in even worse condition. Mary hasn't moved in over 2 hours, and you're not sure she's still breathing. John's pulse is barely detectable, and his skin has taken on the waxy pore that precedes death. Agnes is still conscious, but barely, her eyes unfocused and her speech slurred. This is when you begin to prepare for the possibility that not all of you will see the morning. It's a thought too terrible to contemplate, but medieval life has taught you to face harsh realities without flinching. Death is always present, always waiting, and winter nights like this are when it comes calling. Margaret seems to sense your thoughts. She looks at you with eyes full of love and sorrow, and you can see that she's thinking the same thing. How do you say goodbye to your children? How do you prepare them for a journey they're too young to understand? But you're not dead yet. You're still fighting, still breathing, still hoping against hope that somehow, someway you'll find the strength to make it through the remaining hours until dawn. The fire is nothing but glowing coals now, providing barely enough light to see each other's faces. But those faces are still alive, still animated by the spark of human consciousness that refuses to be extinguished. You close your eyes and gather what strength you have left. The night is far from over, and the worst may yet be to come. But you've survived this long, and that gives you hope that you might survive a little longer. The wind continues to howl, the cold continues to bite, but the human spirit burns on. And sometimes, in the darkest hours of the medieval night, that spirit is all that stands between life and death. The church bell tolls 2 o'clock, its bronze voice barely a whisper in the howling wind. You've been fighting this battle for 8 hours now, and your body is beginning to surrender to forces beyond your control. The cold has penetrated so deeply into your core that you can no longer generate heat through muscle contractions. Your shivering has stopped entirely, not because you're warmer, but because your body no longer has the energy to shiver. Margaret lies pressed against you. Her body is cold as your own, but she continues to move slightly, adjusting the children's positions, trying to keep them as warm as possible. With her own failing body heat, her breathing has become so shallow that you can barely detect it, and when she speaks, her words are slurred and confused. The children, she whispers, her voice barely audible. Are they still? You try to check on them, but your hands are completely useless now. You can't feel anything with your fingers, can't grip or manipulate anything. Instead, you press your face against each child in turn, trying to detect the faint warmth of breath, the subtle rise and fall of their chests. Mary is still alive, but barely. Her breathing is so faint that you have to hold your own breath to detect it. Her skin is cold to the touch, and her pulse is almost non-existent. She's in the final stages of hypothermia, and without immediate warming, she'll be dead within the hour. John is in slightly better condition, perhaps because his larger body mass has given him more reserves to draw on. He's still breathing, though slowly and shallowly, and his pulse is weak but detectable. His lips are blue, and his skin is waxy, but there's still life in him. Agnes, your oldest, is the most alert of the children, though that's not saying much. She can still respond when you speak to her, though her words are confused and her thinking is clearly impaired. She's been helping Margaret tend to the younger children, using her own body heat to warm them, and that activity may have saved her life. The fire is dead now. The last coals have burned out, leaving nothing but cold ash in the center of the room. The temperature inside your hub has dropped to match the outside air, well below zero, cold enough to kill within hours. Your breath freezes instantly when it leaves your mouth, creating a thin layer of ice on your lips and chin. The hole in your roof has grown larger throughout the night, and snow is now accumulating inside the room in significant drifts. The wind swirls through the space constantly, carrying away what little heat your bodies can generate and replacing it with air so cold it burns your lungs. Your shelter has essentially failed. What began the evening as a crude but functional dwelling has been reduced to little more than a partial windbreak. The walls are crumbling, the roof is collapsing, and the floor is covered with snow and debris. You're essentially camping in the ruins of your own home, but you're still alive. And that's something. Your family is still breathing, still clinging to existence despite the impossible odds. The human body's ability to survive extreme conditions is remarkable, and you're pushing those limits to their absolute breaking point. Around to 15, you hear a sound that makes your heart race. Footsteps in the snow outside your havel. Someone is moving around in the storm, and for a moment you wonder if it might be help. Perhaps a neighbor checking on your family, or a lord's man making rounds to assess the damage. But the footsteps are wrong. Too light, too quick, too purposeful. For someone struggling through a blizzard. And then you realize what you're hearing. Looters. People are taking advantage of the chaos to rob the homes of families who may not survive the night. The footsteps pause outside your door and you hear voices, low, urgent whispers that you can't quite make out over the wind. Your heart pounds as you realize that your family, in your weakened state, would be completely helpless against even a single healthy adult. Margaret seems to sense the danger as well. She pulls the children closer and tries to make your family group as small and inconspicuous as possible. In the darkness of your havel, with the fire dead and snow covering everything, you might be mistaken for a pile of debris or abandoned belongings. The voices continue for several minutes, and you hear the sound of someone testing your door. The wooden planks creak and shift, but the leather hinges hold. Then you hear footsteps moving away, heading toward another havel, and you realize that the looters have decided your home isn't worth the effort of breaking into. It's a small mercy, but in your current condition, even small mercies are precious. You don't have the strength to fight off intruders, and your family's few possessions, meager as they are, represent the difference between survival and starvation. If you make it through the night, the incident reminds you of another harsh reality of medieval life. In times of crisis, the social bonds that normally hold communities together can break down completely. Neighbors who would normally help each other become competitors for scarce resources. The strong prey on the weak, and survival becomes a matter of individual cunning rather than collective effort. Your village, which seemed like a community during the day, has become a collection of isolated families, fighting their own desperate battles against the elements. Some will survive, others won't, and by morning, the social landscape will have changed forever. Around 2:30, you begin to experience something that medieval people called the final warming, a phenomenon that occurs in the last stages of hypothermia. Your body, in a desperate attempt to preserve life, redirects blood from your extremities back to your core organs. For a few minutes, you actually feel warmer, and your thinking becomes clearer. It's a cruel trick of physiology, because this warming sensation is actually a sign that death is imminent. Your body is making one last attempt to keep your vital organs functioning, but it's a temporary measure at best. Once this final surge of warmth passes, your core temperature will drop below the point of no return. But for these few precious minutes, you're more alert than you've been all night. You can think clearly, speak coherently, and assess your situation with brutal honesty. And what you see is not encouraging. Your family is dying. Mary is barely breathing, her pulse so weak that you can hardly detect it. John is unconscious, his body temperature so low that his skin feels like ice. Agnes is still responsive, but her condition is deteriorating rapidly. Margaret is in the worst shape of all. She's been using her own body heat to warm the children throughout the night, sacrificing her own survival for theirs. Her core temperature has dropped dangerously low. She's showing signs of severe hypothermia, confusion, slurred speech, and the telltale drowsiness that precedes unconsciousness. You need to make some hard decisions. With no fuel left to burn and no way to generate heat, your family's survival depends entirely on body heat and whatever protection you can provide for each other. But with 4 people and limited warmth to share, not everyone may survive. The mathematics of survival are brutal and unforgiving. The children, with their smaller body mass, lose heat faster than adults, but they also require less energy to keep warm. Margaret, despite being an adult, has depleted her reserves caring for the children. You, with your injured hands and exhausted body, may not have much to contribute. In medieval times, these kinds of calculations were a grim reality. Families facing starvation had to decide which members were most likely to survive and focus their limited resources accordingly. It's a choice no human being should have to make, but extreme circumstances sometimes demand extreme measures. But you're not ready to make that choice yet. As long as there's breath in your body, you'll continue fighting for all of your family members. The night may be dark and cold, but it's not over yet. And you refuse to give up hope. You pull your family closer together, arranging them so that the smallest are in the center where they'll be warmest. Margaret protests weakly, insisting that she's fine, but you can see that she's barely conscious. You position yourself on the outside of the group, using your larger body to shield the others from the worst of the wind. The animals that are still alive press close as well. The goat, which has been remarkably hardy throughout the ordeal, lies down next to your family group, its warm body adding precious heat to the collective effort. A few of the chickens, driven by instinct, huddle against your legs. This is survival at its most primitive level. A group of living beings press together against the darkness, sharing whatever warmth they can generate, refusing to surrender to the forces that would destroy them. It's not dignified. It's not comfortable, but it might be enough to see you through the remaining hours until dawn. The wind continues to howl outside, but you think you detect a subtle change in its tone. Perhaps the storm is beginning to weaken, or perhaps it's just wishful thinking. Either way, you cling to the hope that the worst is behind you, and that morning will bring relief. Your body temperature continues to drop, and you can feel your consciousness beginning to fade. The final warming has passed, and now the cold is claiming you inch by inch. Your heart rate has slowed to a dangerous level, and your breathing has become so shallow that Margaret has to watch your chest carefully to make sure you're still alive. This is the point where many people simply let go. The cold, the pain, the hopelessness of the situation combine to create a kind of peaceful surrender. Your body stops fighting, your mind stops struggling, and you drift away into a sleep from which you'll never wake. But something keeps you anchored to life. Perhaps the sound of your children's labored breathing. Perhaps Margaret's hand in yours. Perhaps just the stubborn human refusal to accept defeat. You force yourself to stay conscious, to keep your eyes open, to continue the struggle even when every instinct tells you to surrender. The church bell tolls again, though you're not sure what time it is. The sound seems to come from very far away, as If you're hearing it through water or thick fog, your perception of time and space is becoming distorted. Another sign that your brain is being deprived of oxygen, but you're still here, still breathing, still fighting. Your family is still alive, still clinging to existence, despite the impossible odds. And somewhere in the distance, though it seems impossibly far away, dawn is approaching. The night is not over yet, but you've survived this long in a world where death is always just one cold night away. That's an achievement worth celebrating. You close your eyes, takes your hand in hers, and you can feel that her fingers are warm again. We made it, she whispers, tears streaming down her face. We actually made it. You nod, too exhausted and overwhelmed to speak. You survived a night that would have killed most people, a night that did kill many of your neighbors and friends. You've learned things about yourself and your family that you never knew, depths of courage and endurance that you never suspected you possessed. Your children are recovering as well. Mary is still weak, but she's conscious now and able to sip small amounts of broth. John is sitting up, looking around at the other survivors with wide eyes. Agnes is helping Father Benedict tend to some of the other injured villagers, her natural compassion overcoming her own exhaustion. As the night slowly gives way to dawn, you reflect on what you've experienced. You've seen the worst that medieval winter can offer: cold that kills, storms that destroy, conditions that reduce human beings to their most basic survival instincts. But you've also seen the best of humanity, the love of a mother willing to sacrifice everything for her children, the courage of a father who refuses to give up, the compassion of neighbors who risk their own lives to help others. The church bell tolls 5 o'clock, and you can see definite signs of dawn approaching. The sky is lightening in the east, and the wind has dropped to a whisper. The temperature is still well below freezing, but it's no longer the killing cold of the deep night. You've survived. Your family has survived. It's been the longest, coldest, most terrifying night of your life, but it's almost. Soon the sun will rise. The temperature will begin to climb, and the work of rebuilding your lives can begin. But for now, you're content to sit by the fire, holding your wife's hand, watching your children recover their strength, and marveling at the simple fact that you're all still alive. In a world where death is always just one cold night away, that's a miracle worth celebrating. The wind continues to die down, and through the church windows, you can see the first faint glimmers of dawn on the horizon. The night that nearly killed you is finally ending, and with it comes the promise of a new day, a new chance, a new beginning. You close your eyes and offer a silent prayer of gratitude. You've been tested by forces beyond human control, and you've emerged victorious, battered, exhausted, and forever changed, but victorious. Done its worst, and you've survived. The medieval winter has. That's an achievement that will stay with you for the rest of your life, however long that might be. You've learned that the human spirit, when pushed to its absolute limits, can endure almost anything, and sometimes, in the darkest hours of the longest nights, that knowledge is enough to keep you going until the dawn finally comes. The church bell tolls 6 o'clock, and for the first time in 12 hours, the sound brings hope instead of dread. Through the small windows of the stone church, you can see the sky lightening in the east, not the false dawn that sometimes appears before sunrise, but the real thing. The genuine promise that the longest night of your life is finally coming to an end. You're still weak, still damaged from your ordeal, but you're alive. Your family is alive, against odds that seemed impossible. Just hours, you've all survived a medieval winter night that claimed the lives of more than half your village. The Warmth from the church fire has penetrated your bones, and feeling has returned to most of your extremities, though your hands remain swollen and painful. Margaret sits beside you, her color much improved from the deathly pallor she wore in the depths of the night. She's sipping warm broth and watching your children with the fierce protectiveness of a mother who has nearly lost everything. Her ordeal has aged her. You can see new lines around her eyes, a new weariness in her expression. But she's alive, and that's all that matters. Little Mary, your youngest, is conscious now and able to speak, though her voice is weak and hoarse. The lung fever that threatened her life seems to have broken, perhaps shocked away by the extreme cold, or perhaps simply overcome by her young body's remarkable resilience. She's wrapped in blankets near the fire, and color is slowly returning to her cheeks. John, your 8-year-old son, has recovered remarkably well. Children, it seems, are more resilient than adults. Comes to extreme cold, and his small body has bounced back from hypothermia with surprising speed. He's even managed to eat some bread soaked in broth, and he's looking around the church with the curiosity of a child who has survived something extraordinary. Agnes, your 12-year-old daughter, has become something of a hero among the survivors. Her own ordeal, she's been helping Father Benedict tend to the other villagers, bringing them water, adjusting their blankets, and offering words of comfort. The night has matured her in ways that years of normal life never could have. Father Benedict moves among the survivors like a shepherd tending his flock, offering spiritual comfort and practical assistance. In equal measure, the church has become a refuge, a sanctuary in the truest sense of the word, and he has opened its doors to anyone who needed shelter from the storm. The worst is over, he announces to the gathered survivors. As the light outside grows stronger, the storm has passed, and the temperature is beginning to rise. We've made it through the night. A murmur of relief and gratitude passes through the group. 23 people have survived out of a village that housed nearly 60 just yesterday. It's a catastrophic loss, but for those who remain, it's also a miracle. Each survivor represents a victory against forces that seem determined to claim every life in the village. As the morning light grows stronger, you begin to assess the full extent of the damage. Through the church windows, you can see that your village has been devastated. Roofs have collapsed, walls have crumbled, and debris is scattered everywhere. The storm has essentially destroyed the physical infrastructure of your community, leaving the survivors to start over from almost nothing. Your own Havel is completely gone. Where your home stood yesterday, there's now just a pile of rubble, partially buried under snow. Everything you owned, your few possessions, your tools, your winter food stores, has been destroyed or scattered by the wind. You're alive, but you're also homeless and destitute. But you're not alone in your loss. Every survivor in the church has lost their home, their possessions, their livelihood. The storm has been an equalizer, reducing everyone to the same basic level of need. Rich or poor, young or old, everyone who survived the night now faces the same challenge: how to rebuild their lives from nothing. Around 6:30, as the light outside grows stronger, Father Benedict organizes the survivors into groups. Will venture out to search for other survivors and to assess the damage. The injured and weak will remain in the church, which will serve as a temporary shelter until more permanent arrangements can be made. You want to help with the search, but your damaged hands make you more liability than asset. Instead, you remain by the fire with Margaret and the children, slowly regaining your strength and marveling at the simple fact that you're all still breathing. The search parties return throughout the morning with grim news. Thomas, your neighbor, and his 3 children have been found frozen to death in the ruins of their home. The old woman who lived alone at the edge of the village, is gone. Her body discovered buried under the collapsed roof of her havel. An entire family from the other side of town, parents and 4 children, perished when their shelter failed completely. The death toll continues to mount as more bodies are discovered. By mid-morning, it's clear that the village has lost nearly 2/3 of its population. Families have been wiped out entirely, bloodlines ended, generations of accumulated knowledge lost forever. But there are also miraculous survivals. A baby barely 6 months old is found alive in the ruins of a collapsed house, somehow protected by the bodies of his parents, who died shielding him from the cold. An elderly man who everyone assumed was dead emerges from a root cellar where he spent the night, weak but alive. Each discovery, whether of life or death, adds to the complex tapestry of survival and loss that defines this morning. After, the village that existed yesterday is gone forever. But something new is being born from its ashes. A community of survivors bound together by shared trauma and mutual dependence. Around 7 o'clock, as the sun finally crests the horizon and sends its pale light across the devastated landscape, you venture outside the church. For the first time since your rescue, the sight that greets you is both heartbreaking and awe-inspiring. The storm has transformed your familiar village into an alien landscape. Snow drifts reach the eaves of the few buildings still standing. Trees that have stood for decades have been uprooted and tossed about like twigs. The carefully maintained boundaries between properties have been erased, replaced by a chaotic jumble of debris and destruction. But the sun is shining. The wind has died to a gentle breeze. The temperature, while still well below freezing, feels almost warm compared to the killing cold of the night. You can hear birds singing in the distance, a sound that seemed impossible just hours ago, when the world was nothing but howling wind and deadly cold. Your damaged hands throb in the morning air, and you know that you'll probably lose at least 2 fingers to frostbite. The injury will make it difficult to work, to provide for your family, to rebuild your life. But you're alive to worry about such things, and that makes even the pain a blessing. Margaret emerges from the church behind you, carrying Mary in her arms. Your youngest daughter is still weak, but she's alert and responsive. She looks around at the transformed landscape with wide eyes, too young to fully understand what has happened, but old enough to sense that something momentous has occurred. "It's beautiful," she whispers, and you realize she's right. Despite the destruction, despite the loss of life, despite the enormous challenges that lie ahead, there is something beautiful about this morning. The sun on the snow, the clear blue sky, the simple facts that you're all here to see it. It's a kind of beauty that can only be appreciated by those who have come close to losing everything. John and Agnes join you outside, and your family stands together in the morning light. Survivors of a night that will be remembered and talked about for generations. You've been tested by forces beyond human control, and you've emerged victorious. Battered, changed, forever marked by the experience, but victorious nonetheless. Father Benedict appears small beside you in the cold air. "The Lord's men will be here soon," he says. "They'll want to assess the damage, count the survivors, decide what's to be done with the village." You nod, understanding the implications. In the feudal system that governs your life, even natural disasters become matters of economics and politics. The Lord will need to decide whether it's worth rebuilding the village or whether the survivors should be relocated elsewhere. Your future, like your past, is not entirely your own to determine. But for now, in this moment, you're free. Free from the crushing weight of the night's terror. Free from the immediate threat of death. Free to stand in the morning sun with your family and marvel at the simple miracle of survival. The church bell tolls 7 o'clock, and the sound carries clearly in the still air. It's a sound of celebration now, not warning. A bronze voice proclaiming that life continues, that hope endures, that the human spirit cannot be broken by cold or storm or any other force that nature can unleash. Other survivors emerge from the church, blinking in the bright morning light. Like creatures emerging from hibernation, they move slowly, carefully, still weak from their ordeal, alive and grateful for it. Children who were near death just hours ago are now playing in the snow. Their resilience a testament to the remarkable adaptability of the human body and spirit. Around 7:30, you hear the sound of horses approaching. The Lord's men, as Father Benedict predicted, coming to assess the situation and determine what's to be done. They ride through the devastated village with expressions of shock and dismay, clearly unprepared for the extent of the destruction. The lead rider, a well-dressed man you recognize as the Lord's steward, dismounts near the church and speaks briefly with Father Benedict. Their conversation is too quiet for you to hear, but you can guess its content. How many dead? How many survivors? What resources will be needed for recovery? After a few minutes, the steward approaches the group of survivors. His expression is grave, but not unsympathetic. His lordship has instructed me to provide immediate assistance, he announces. Food, clothing, and temporary shelter will be arranged. No one will be left to starve or freeze. It's more compassion than you expected from the feudal system. But then again, the Lord has practical reasons for keeping his peasants alive. Dead serfs produce no crops, pay no taxes, provide no labor. From his perspective, the survivors represent an investment that needs to be protected. But you're grateful nonetheless. The promise of food and shelter means that your family will survive not just the night, but the difficult days and weeks ahead. You'll have time to heal, to plan, to figure out how to rebuild your life from the ruins of the old one. As the morning progresses, the full scope of the disaster becomes clear. The storm wasn't limited to your village. Reports come in of similar devastation throughout the region. Entire communities have been wiped out. Roads are impassable, and the death toll is mounting into the hundreds. But there are also stories of remarkable survival, of families who endured conditions that should have killed them, communities that pulled together to save lives. Your own story is just one among many, but it's yours, and it's precious beyond measure. Around 8 o'clock, as the sun climbs higher and the temperature begins to rise noticeably, you make a decision. Despite your injured hands, despite your exhaustion, despite the overwhelming nature of the task ahead, you're going to help rebuild not just your own life, but your community. You approach Father Benedict, who is organizing the relief efforts with remarkable efficiency. What can I do to help? You ask. He looks at your bandaged hands, at your still pale complexion, at the obvious signs of your ordeal. You should rest, he says gently. You've been through enough. We've all been through enough, you reply. But we're still here. We're still alive, and that means we have work to do. He nods, understanding. There are bodies to be recovered and buried, debris to be cleared, temporary shelters to be built. Choose what you can manage with your injuries. You choose to help with the search for survivors despite your limitations. Your knowledge of the village and its people makes you valuable. And even with damaged hands, you can call out, listen for responses, and guide others to places where survivors might be found. The work is heartbreaking. For every survivor discovered, there are 3 or 4 bodies to be recovered. Families you've known all your life are gone, wiped out in a single night. Children you watched grow up are found frozen in their parents' arms. The human cost of the storm is almost too much to bear. But there are also moments of joy. A young mother and her baby are found alive in a collapsed root cellar, weak but breathing. An elderly couple is discovered huddled together in the ruins of their home, both alive despite being exposed to the cold for hours. Each rescue is a victory, a small triumph against the forces that tried to claim every life in the village. By mid-morning, the search is largely complete. 23 survivors out of nearly 60 residents, a survival rate of less than 40%. It's a catastrophic loss, but for those who remain, it's also a new beginning. The Lord's men have brought wagons full of supplies, food, blankets, tools, and materials for temporary shelters. The survivors are organized into work groups, each with specific tasks. Despite the devastation, loss of life, despite the work of rebuilding has already begun. You find yourself assigned to a group tasked with clearing debris from the main road through the village. It's work you can do despite your injured hands, and it's satisfying to see progress being made, to watch order slowly emerge from chaos. Margaret and the children remain at the church, which has become the temporary center of the new community. She helps prepare meals for the work crews, tends to the injured, and provides comfort to those who have lost family members. Your children, remarkably resilient, help where they can and play with the other survivor children when their energy allows. As you work, you reflect on what you've learned during the long night. You've discovered reserves of strength and endurance you never knew you possessed. You've seen your family tested by extreme conditions and watched them prove their courage and resilience. You've witnessed both the worst and the best of human nature, the selfishness of leaders and the compassion of neighbors who risk their lives to help others. Most importantly, you've learned that survival isn't just about individual strength or luck. It's about community, about people pulling together in the face of impossible odds, about refusing to give, even when giving up would be easier. The sun climbs higher and the temperature continues to rise. The snow begins to soften slightly, and you can hear the sound of water dripping from the eaves of the church. Spring is still months away, but this morning feels like a promise that winter won't last forever, that warmth and life will return to the world. Around noon, Father Benedict calls a halt to the work, so that the survivors can gather for a memorial service for those who didn't make it through the night. You stand with your family in the ruins of your village, listening to the priest's words about eternal rest and divine mercy, and you feel a complex mixture of grief and gratitude. Grief for the friends and neighbors who are gone, for the children who will never grow up, for the families that have been destroyed, but also gratitude, profound, overwhelming gratitude, for the simple fact that you and your loved ones are still here, still breathing, still able to hold each other and face whatever challenges lie ahead. The service ends with the church bell tolling once for each person who died in the storm. 37 times the bronze voice rings out across the devastated landscape, a final farewell to those who couldn't survive the night. Then, after a moment of silence, it tolls once more for hope for the future for the survivors who will carry on. As the afternoon progresses, temporary shelters begin to take shape. They're crude affairs, little more than lientos made from salvaged wood and thatch, but they're warm and dry, and they represent the first steps toward rebuilding your lives. Your own shelter is small, barely large enough for your family, but it's yours. You've helped build it with your own hands, despite your injuries, and that makes it precious. Tonight, you'll sleep under a roof again, protected from the elements, surrounded by your family, but more than that, you'll sleep as survivors. You've faced the worst that medieval winter could throw at you, and you've emerged victorious. You've learned that the human spirit, when tested by extreme conditions, can endure almost anything. As the sun begins to set on this remarkable day, you stand outside your new shelter, with Margaret and your children looking out over the village that's slowly rising from the ruins of the old. 1. It's different now, smaller, changed, marked forever by the events of the previous night. But it's alive. And that's what matters. And the church bell tolls 6 o'clock, marking the end of your first full day as a survivor. In 12 hours, you've gone from the brink of death to the beginning of a new life. It's been the longest day of your existence, but also perhaps the most meaningful. You've learned things about yourself and your family that you never knew. You've discovered depths of courage and endurance that you never suspected you possessed. You've seen the worst and best of human nature, often in the same person, sometimes in yourself. Most importantly, you've learned that survival isn't just about making it through the night. It's about what you do with the morning that follows, how you use the gift of continued existence, how you honor those who didn't make it. By living fully and purposefully. As darkness begins to fall, a gentle darkness now, of the killing cold of the previous night, you gather your family around a small fire outside your shelter. The flames dance in the evening air, casting warm light on your faces, and you tell your children stories about the people who didn't survive, keeping their memory alive through words and love. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. There will be crops to plant, homes to build, lives to reconstruct from the ground up. The work will be hard, the progress slow, the setbacks frequent. But tonight, you're content to sit by the fire with your family, marveling at the simple miracle of being alive. You wouldn't have lasted one night in a medieval peasant's winter, not the way you lived it, not with the resources you had, not under the conditions you faced, but somehow, impossibly, you did last. You survived, and in surviving, you've become something more than you were before, stronger, wiser, more grateful. Every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of warmth and love. The stars come out brilliant and clear in the cold night sky, but tonight, they don't seem cold or distant. They seem like beacons of hope, reminders that even in the darkest hours, there's always light somewhere, always the promise of dawn, always the possibility of survival. You pull your family closer, feeling their warmth, hearing their breathing, grateful beyond words for their presence. You've been tested by forces beyond human control, and you've emerged victorious, not unscathed, not unchanged, but victorious in the end, nonetheless, is enough. And that, more than enough, it's everything. And there we have it. One night in a medieval peasant's winter that would absolutely destroy any modern person. From the moment the sun set on that January evening in 1347, to the dawn that seemed like it might never come, we've experienced 12 hours of pure survival horror that makes our worst winter nights seem like tropical vacations. We've journeyed through the crushing reality of medieval winter, the inadequate shelter, the complete absence of heating, the constant threat of hypothermia and death. How a single winter storm could wipe out entire communities. How families could freeze to death in their own homes. How survival often came down to nothing more than shared body heat and sheer determination. This wasn't the romanticized medieval world of Hollywood movies or fantasy novels. This was reality, harsh, unforgiving, and utterly indifferent to humans. The knights in shining armor, the grand feasts, the cozy taverns with roaring fires. Those were the experiences of perhaps 1% of the population. For everyone else, winter was a season of death, a test of endurance. That many failed, but perhaps most remarkably, people survived. They found ways to endure conditions that would kill most modern humans within hours. They developed strategies, built communities, and created support systems that helped them make it through the darkest nights. Their suffering wasn't meaningless. It was the foundation upon which our comfortable modern lives were built. The family in our story represents millions of medieval peasants who faced similar ordeals. Some survived, others didn't. All of them showed a resilience and determination that's almost impossible to comprehend from our modern perspective. They lived on the absolute edge of survival, where a single cold night could mean the difference between life and death. So the next time you adjust your thermostat, pull on a warm coat, or complain about a chilly evening, remember the medieval peasant family that nearly froze to death in their own home. Remember the countless millions who lived and died in similar circumstances, whose struggles and sacrifices made our comfortable modern lives possible. Their stories deserve their suffering acknowledged, and their incredible resilience celebrated, because in the end, they were us, human beings trying to make the best of impossible circumstances, finding love and meaning in the darkest of times, and